My biggest concern about maintaining our way of life that we've all become pretty addicted to in the at least the Western world is the cyber resiliency of our online environments.
Assemble the council.
Welcome to the Cybersecurity Council podcast. I am your podcast host, Scott Brammer. Today I am joined by our illustrious president, Mr. Brian Greene. In today's landscape, security is no longer just an IT issue. It's a core business imperative. But how can a company truly embrace that philosophy? Yes, it starts with the CISO. For too long, the CISO has been a tactical leader, sometimes completely outside the room where business decisions are made. Our focus today is on why the CISO must become a true member of the executive leadership team and a strategic leader. We want to discuss how this fundamental shift improves the company's ability to assess and manage risk. Joining us today is a titan. We have a security expert. His name is Doug Merritt. He comes to us as the CEO of Aviatrix, but he has also been with Splunk and put a dent in the side of the security world. Mr. Brian Greene, our president of the Cybersecurity Council, I give you the honor of the first question to our guest, Doug Merritt.
Awesome. Thanks for the intro there, Scott. And just to say, Doug, maybe it makes a little bit of sense to say how we met, take everybody through that, because I've been in a lot of startup cybersecurity software companies, a couple of which have been acquired by Fortune 500 companies, publicly traded companies. And the CEO job is hard. It's a job that is, you're the most strategic decision maker at the company. You've got to be a leader of a lot of people, whether that be 100 people or 10,000 people or more. And you're not always liked. And when I worked with two guys specifically, it was Enoch Long and Doug. It was Dan McBreen. It took me a minute to get his name out of my brain. And when we were building the Cybersecurity Council in Austin, the two of them came to me with an immense amount of glow and excitement to say, you got to meet this guy, Doug Merritt. He was the CEO of Splunk when we worked there. He's the best leader we've ever worked for. You got to meet him. And I'm like, whoa, like very infrequently in my career have two people that I had that much respect for come up to me and say, you got to meet the CEO that I spent years working for. He's the best guy. He's the best leader. He's all these compliments. I got to meet this guy. So they were fortunate. I was fortunate enough, or we were fortunate enough, I should say, the Cybersecurity Council, for them to make that introduction. And then I want to publicly just thank you and tell you that we have an immense amount of gratitude for how involved you've been. I mean, I think you've spoken at least a couple of our events over the last few years. You're now here on our podcast. And as Scott said, I mean, I know what I know of you from the standpoint of seeing you a couple times in person, talking to you now, but I watch all of your content. I see what goes out in the press. I see what goes on LinkedIn. You have this amazing way of just delivering really complex messages super succinctly and with purpose. And your message comes across really, really, really great. And I know you probably know that, but I wanted to say that up front and also thank you again for being here with us today.
Well, I really appreciate those kind words. And both Enoch and Dan are awesome. I've had the honor of working with so many incredibly talented people that make me look probably better than I am. Those two of those. But no, it's been a pleasure getting to know you and getting involved in the work that you're doing and getting some time with some of the local CISOs here in Austin. And I'm really excited about continuing to support and about being on this podcast.
Awesome. Well, yeah. So the reason that we're here today is from what I kind of already alluded to, which was you made a post probably middle of last year on LinkedIn about the fact that you all at Aviatrix had promoted your CISO from the role that they were in to being a member of the executive leadership team. And while that's a huge deal, you went as far as to write, this isn't just a promotion on paper. this is an entire mindset shift for the company and the culture of the company by adding this chief information security officer to our executive leadership team. And when I saw that, I'm like, oh, we got to talk to Doug about that. So I'm stoked that we're here. And the first question is for you is like, in your mind, what is the single biggest risk for a company of any size? I mean, you can talk about big publicly traded companies if you want, to not have the CISO as a member of the executive leadership team. What risks are now added to the business when that person's voice isn't in the executive leadership room or the board room?
I'm shocked that the average CISO is not a direct report to the CEO at this point in time. And it's a challenge. I understand the challenge. Like you've got management bandwidth and span of control and a bunch of other elements. And there's so many people that should have direct access to the CEO. And they should, no matter what, right? If you're a good CEO, you're out talking to individual contributors, directors, VPs, to your direct reports all the time. But there's been a narrative in the industry for about 20 years that software is the end of the world, and now it's AI is the end of the world, and every company is now a software company. And it took a while for that to actually play out, but you now see it, right? Old world companies, manufacturing companies, retailers, hospitality and service organizations are defined by the online presence and the software that they're driving. That is a greater and greater component of the value. Their competitive differentiation and the value that they're driving with their customers. And cybersecurity, like my biggest concern about maintaining our way of life that we've all become pretty addicted to in the at least the Western world, is the cyber resiliency of our online environments. And the dilemma that I find, like, what's the argument to have a CISO be a peer with a chief revenue officer, a CFO, a chief technology officer? Because again, there's so many people that need that week in, week out airtime with the other executives. If your company is largely a online and or software and or bits and bytes delivery organization, then cyber is it's something that can't be neatly compartmentalized anymore. It is pervasive across an organization, and reporting relationships. So we all want to, I say all the time, like, don't be over rotated on what your span of control is and what you own, and like be a owner, not a renter. Get involved no matter where you sit. But the exposure does actually matter, and what you own does matter. Like, you got to pretend like you're involved in everything, but you still got a job. And I don't know how any of these organizations, anyone that really is tech forward at this point in time, can feel confident and comfortable operating unless they've got the right CISO at the table. But every discussion has to involve, to an extent, the overall risk profile that an organization faces. And the cyber risk is becoming, it's part and parcel with the day-to-day risk profile and leverage profile that an organization has right now as they do business.
Yeah, just a follow up there, if you don't mind. You mentioned tech forward companies as kind of the focus. They're like, how are they not already doing this, putting the CISO in the ELT team? What's your opinion of like non-tech forward companies? Because I very vividly remember in the last 12 months or 18 months, a couple hospitals going completely offline. Not saying anything against hospitals, but they're not typically tech forward companies. I mean, the Colonial Pipeline thing that took place, not typically a tech forward company. So do you feel like even non-tech forward companies should be taking the CISO role a lot more serious and putting them up in the ELT?
It's very hard to find a non-tech forward company today. Like, it just got to go back to software and AI is eating the world. And I think those were two great examples. And you can see the impact. Like, we've interwoven our technology delivery so tightly with every other element of delivery that we have across the organization. What you manufacture, how you distribute, how you manage your supply chain, how your sales teams engage, how your post-sales teams engage, how do your customers think about you? That I don't know it's hard for me to imagine many companies today that are going to be successful that aren't leading with a technology footprint. They still have got other things they have to do, but technology is just so deeply embedded into everything that they do.
Makes sense.
Doug, returning to your announcement earlier this year on LinkedIn, we are going to elevate our CISO to our strategic team. Why did you feel it was necessary to state that publicly?
I think it helped with some of this evangelism. One, when I got here, we didn't have a CISO. So we didn't even have a VP of security. So have cyber risk. So I had to find the right person. But as we found John Chen, who's our CISO, and he got up to speed, I thought both for our own capability within the company, we are a technology company. We were focused when I first got here on delivering a unique and unparalleled cloud and networking experience for organizations, which has a bunch of cyber elements to it. Your networks have got to be secure. But the pivot we've gone through over the past year and a half or so has been to take that network heritage and focus on what I think is a bigger problem, is ultimately how all of our customers were using us anyway, which is how do you use the network as an effective visibility and runtime control and enforcement point, which puts us now square in the CISO's domain. I'd say kind of cloud firewalling, but firewalling, it doesn't describe adequately what I think a zero trust workload protection framework does. Firewalling elements are an aspect of it. But I think both the fact that we are a tech-forward company, the fact that we deeply care about our both agility and risk management, and that we were pivoting to address much more directly the CISO as one of our main constituents as a customer and a user, made it really a de facto decision to get done. But I thought the public post was, we had the session, I don't know, probably a year and a half ago, Brian, where the CFO of CrowdStrike and I were up on stage. And we're talking about how prevalent board involvement and awareness need to be around CISOs and the risks the CISOs face and the culpability they have, and like how do we elevate the role back then. So it's definitely something I've been thinking about for many years now. Splunk taught me a lot about the cyber world, and I got to spend a lot of time with CISOs. And I have so much respect and empathy for the job. I can't think of a much harder executive role right now. The playing field is tilted so far against the CISO. The advantage absolutely is with the adversaries right now. And when you start to couple some of the personal liability that, through some weird decisions have been invoked around these CISOs, I think that as an industry, as companies, as business, we've got to do a better job of helping the world recognize what is the true scope and capability and importance and leverage that you get out of the right chief information security officer.
Yeah. Small celebration real quick for the news on our TCSC member, Tim Brown, and his case being thrown out. I loved seeing that.
Yeah. Yeah.
First, Doug, you are absolutely well known for being a security forward leader. Being the leader of Splunk is absolutely going to do that to anyone, but you've carried that forward into Aviatrix. And I know that early in your Aviatrix days, you made sure that you met with as many as possible, or even all of your clients. You are making sure you examined the entire landscape. And now I'm leaping forward in time, 6 months after publicly stating our CISO is a member of our strategic team, we are elevating the office of the CISO. Is John Chen and the office of the CISO helping you overcome any strategic blind spots? Is it working the way you hoped?
It is. It is. And again, we go back to all of us. I'll just give one simple example. All of us wrestling with deployment and effective and safe utilization of AI across the company. I'm on the bandwagon of we might be overhyped with some, so I don't know where the hype cycle is, but the reality of the impact that AI is having and will have over the next 3 to 5 years, I'm not as much hype as there is. I'm not sure people have really digested how impactful it's going to be. But to make that impactful, it's got to be woven into everything an organization does. And the security profile of these new workloads that are entering the landscape is not where most people would hope they would be, which makes sense. It's ChatGPT is less than 4 years old. The MCP server framework, I think, is 13, 14, 15 months old. So many of the advances that people have been driving are just in their 1.0, 2.0, 3.0 iterations. You don't really get a lot of the depth of enterprise features and security features that it warrants because of the need to get to market fast and make an impact and actually get the market to come your way. And so just in that one small instance, like having John at the seat every single week in our ELT meetings, every single month in our monthly business reviews, our quarterly business reviews, every single board meeting, that alone has made a huge difference. How do you go as fast as you possibly can and still, and again, I'm sure we'll spend some time on what makes this CISO really effective with the executive team. So you want to go fast. Like you're in business for a reason. That's to serve customers, make sure your employees are engaged and happy, drive profitable revenue for an organization. And that all demands agility and speed, but it can't come at the complete consequence of security and risk management and providing assurance and safety to your customers. So I think his voice on our leadership team has really helped there.
Speaking in general terms, Doug, if a CISO wants a seat at the table, certainly they need to communicate effectively. But do you have advice for key language or specific interests that would facilitate the influence?
Yes, I do. And let me use an analogy from finance, because the CFO has always had a seat at the table. But there are different types of CFOs. Right? There are the CFOs that are more audit oriented in their background. They're the police officer in the company around capital allocation. They often are the office of no on getting things done. They're a gate to get through. And there's reasons why you want that in a CFO. Like there's many different types of CFOs for a reason. But I view the CFO's job primarily as facilitating responsible capital decision-making across the executive team. If the CFO knows sales better than the sales head, or knows engineering better than the engineering head, and can make better capital allocation decisions than they can for their function, I've got a bigger problem. Like I've got the wrong CRO or the wrong CTO. What they need is help me make these decisions. Like I want to be responsible also. I've got a lot of pressures to move quickly. You are the expert in financial modeling and budgeting and planning and effective financial controls and GRC compliance, and make sure I'm doing my job quickly, but doing it effectively the way that I need to as a responsible executive. A CISO needs to think the exact same way. There are CISOs that become the office of no. Like life is about risk. There is infinite risk. Sitting here with you, a meteor can come through and I could die this next second. You cannot eradicate all risks. Every decision that we make, every time I get in a car, it's a risk-oriented activity, but we still have to live our lives. It's how do you balance risk with overall agility and driving effectiveness within an organization. So my number one advice to CISOs is have empathy. Understand the pressures that your peers are facing and the metrics they're trying to serve. And those generally go really quickly. And there's not a lot of security baked into those metrics typically. So you've got to, and they have to do those roles to actually succeed within the organization. And your job is, like a good CFO, to sit with them, understand their needs, and then show them how they can go as quickly or close to as quickly as they want and get a free spot and bingo card. They can drive it securely. They can, one of the value props that we are advocating with Aviatrix is because we are all infrastructure as code and have this very elegant, highly distributed architecture, we can actually make security go as fast as your infrastructure as code pipeline and framework and as the development team wants to go. And adopting a framework like us, others like us, you get the best of both worlds. The dev team gets to go as quickly as they want. The security team still gets visibility and the ability to invoke controls. And the dev team does too. Like they care also. Engineering cares about the deployment of their artifacts. But that mentality shift of I'm going to be business oriented, I'm going to understand and have empathy for the speed that my counterparts need to move. And I'm still going to find a way to help them do their jobs securely. And educate them subtly along the way of like, what does security mean? And how do you drive a more secure landscape within any of your departments? But you can't do that by being the blocker or the obstacle to their core metrics.
Being a blocker is a very short career path for a CISO.
Sure. There are some orgs. I have met some orgs where the CISO is empowered to do that. And and that's awesome as far as tightness. Like they are secure. Those orgs don't always move as quickly as they probably should to be as competitive as they should. But I mean, again, there are many different modalities to be successful, but the pace of business is so fast today. And there's so much change on a week-to-week basis that you've got to find a way to achieve your goals, which is drive higher security while not slowing down the business.
Yeah. I got to think too, that the perspective of the CISO in these conversations with the ELT and the board, even on non-security topics, is probably going to be beneficial at certain times, right? I mean, the CISO role for 20 years has been, at least in my understanding, mostly technical, a lot of FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Like, I got to go get money to buy these software things that I need so I can actually protect these different environments. But we've had this big conversation inside the Cybersecurity Council over the last year or two about speaking the language of risk and what does it mean to attach, a certain amount of risk to a dollar amount, an impact dollar amount. If this thing happens, we're going to have to pay this much money potentially for that thing happening. And here's what we have to spend to go try to keep that thing from happening. Like, that's the most simple way to put it. But speaking that way to CEOs, CFOs, GCs, and chief legal officers probably is a lot better than trying to scare them into giving you money for something. And then I think too, maybe, Doug, you tell me if I'm wrong, having a CISO's perspective in the room on some other decision that the business might be making that you wouldn't have their perspective if they weren't sitting there. They might add something into the conversation that no one else in the room could add.
Right. I mean, the right CISO, again, just everything is risk. I want to enter a new country. You need to have a whole bunch of requirements, compliance and security requirements to be able to do that effectively. So if you've got the CISO at the table and they understand the business plans and what you're trying to do is you enter a new country or you develop a new product line or you're contemplating an M&A, that actually can be an accelerant to your business versus like most of the mistakes that I've seen, and I've done it myself as a leader, is I haven't always had the CISO at the executive table, is you bring him in, it's like, hey, we're launching this new country. Can you take a look at this, please? And now they're screwed. Now it's like, oh my God, you forgot all these things. And they're in a bad position. You're in a bad position. You're going slow, much more slow than you wanted to. And everyone gets a negative perception around the CISO. So I do think that going back to, why I made the announcement, I think the position actually matters. Like they've got to stay at the table and they've got to be involved in those early conversations. You've got to have the right mentality of how do I make sure that we enter that new country as quickly as possible? I think the overall orientation around the cyber team and around security teams is you must stop all bad things from happening. And so there's this huge over-rotation on prevention, on patching, on CV cataloging, and all those are important. Like you shouldn't not do those, but anyone that's been around the block a few times, and I'm preaching to the choir with CISOs, I think it's the rest of the company needs to understand this. There is almost zero chance of preventing anything bad from happening. We're living in a totally unfair world. Like if someone wants to break into my house, if they don't care about consequences, a rock is all they need. Like I've got windows, I can have all the locks in the door, I can have alarms, they're going to get in the darn house. And that's what we're living with today in the cyber landscape. So prevention is very, very difficult. Detection and remediation is absolutely mission critical. And that, again, is why I'm so passionate about what we're trying to do at Aviatrix. I think there's only a handful of runtime controls where you can actually contain the blast radius and stop bad things from happening. Identity is one that people have been super focused on. Like, I can shut down a bad actor. That's very important. Endpoint is still important, less important in cloud because we're getting many more ephemeral workloads, and you can't have a persistent agent that's going to have a runtime impact on those workloads. It's network, like there's identity and network. And if you are to do your job as a CISO, going back to like, how do you mitigate the noise? Really think through what are the foundational approaches I can take that help increase speed within the organization and live within that reality of we're all going to be reacting. We're going to have to get much more effective. And that was certainly my pitch at Splunk with data. You got to get much more effective at reaction. You got to be able to diagnose, understand, react, and close. But how do you mitigate the attack more to complement? Maybe 40% on prevention, 60% mitigation. I still see way too many companies at the 70, 80, 90% on prevention. And Salt Typhoon didn't teach us anything. It's like the bad actors are everywhere. Like, if you don't think there's bad actors in your environment, you're smoking something. It's your job to figure out, like, when are they moving and what are they doing? Like, if they're just sitting there doing nothing, who cares? If they're starting some lateral movement and starting to do something nefarious, insert some malware or start some exfiltration, like, you got to detect that, like, because they're there.
Doug, you've been talking about risk. You've been talking about the necessity of a CISO communicating effectively. Financial risk, legal risk, cyber risk. I have the joy of sitting in the CISO hot seat, and I contribute directly to a privacy risk assessment, an enterprise or technology risk assessment. I may contribute to data governance. I may also contribute to AI governance. There's a lot of risks. How do I go into the ELT knowing I've got a list of 47 risks? How do I start communicating effectively to the ELT? How do I say these are the top 3? What sort of mental gymnastics should I do?
So I think it goes back to the business impact. Within any of these jobs, there is the right to hold the job. Like, are we SOC compliant? Are we ISO certified? Are we, like, that is a check mark. It's like, you own that. John, you own that. Like, where are we? Our cert's coming up. Are we close? Do you have what you need? That's a super quick reporting conversation in an ELT meeting. Going back to, like, what's our CV landscape look like? Like, just give me a quick marker on that. The interesting conversations go back to the business conversations. Like, we're beginning to roll out a brand new approach to support and deeply embedding support AI into all of our post-sales activities. That's a business risk. Do we have the right privacy frameworks? Do we have ways to contain the agents? Because they're going to have a lot of access to a bunch of different systems. If they've got unmitigated access to our Zendesk, our Jira, our Confluent, and our Salesforce instances, how do we have any assurance that they are actually conducting themselves effectively? Like, that is if ELT members are not excited about that conversation, then there's something wrong with ELT. And that, like, picking and choosing your battles of what business change is being driven that CISOs are not always advocating, like, it's part of the business change. And then making sure that you're putting yourself into that conversation with the, how do we go quickly and do this effectively, but make sure that you all feel confident in your metrics. Because if you deploy this, and you start to, head of support, you start to get this great insight, but then we're breached, like, you're going to be screwed. Like, this is your system, and we're jointly screwed. But your metrics are going to be hammered just like my metrics are. But I think that goes back to that empathy and the teaming and making sure that the conversations that you're driving have the right relevance and the right importance and the right poignancy in that moment to capture one's attention.
Yeah, I'm curious too, Doug. We mentioned at the onset of this that you're, from the people that I know that have worked for you, are a great leader of people, and to be a member of the ELT, you've got to be a very good leader of people. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't have got there. And we've gathered inside our cybersecurity council that so much of the success of a CISO, whether they're on the ELT or not, is their ability to build and maintain relationships with the rest of the group and to communicate, to have an actual understanding of, to your point earlier, what the CFO is thinking about. Is there any one non-technical skill that you would say is like totally, absolutely required for a CISO to be successful if they're going to be on the ELT?
Super high curiosity beyond your domain. I think is one of those that I really key in on for my executive, for people, for humans. It's what I'm trying to drive with my kids every day, and like constantly ask why from an empathetic and open lens to understand, going back to that empathy, the other people, like what is a day in the life like for a CFO? What's a day in the life like for a CRO? What are their challenges every single day? Positional power, I think, is something, again, that goes back to hierarchy does matter and role does matter, but a good leader rarely uses their positional power. And the CISO's got a very strong stick to use when they have to use it. Hopefully they do. Hopefully the board and the CEO give them that stick to use. But you just have to be super thoughtful when you use it. Going back to, are you generally the enabler and the educator? And that happens because you understand the landscape of the other executives and what they're actually trying to get done. It makes you a much better leader, right? To be a really good executive. In my career, I purposefully had roles in engineering and sales and professional services and marketing, because I felt it was going to be difficult to be a good CEO unless you had lived at least a couple of years of walking in the shoes of the different people you're trying to manage. That's a weird approach, and it's expensive because there's a lot. The straight path is I'm just a sales guy that keeps going up the ranks, or engineering guy, and now I'm the CEO and the founder. But I think it's so important to be an effective leader and an effective executive, and you don't have to do it by holding the jobs. There's so much good education around. There's so many good groups you can join. There's in your local network, like there's. All of us know people with these different roles. And if you're curious and asking about their challenges and how they got there and what they worry about at night, I think it makes you so much more effective in any executive role, and certainly as a CISO.
Man, that's a great answer. I mean, I and curiosity, you mentioned your kids. It brought me right into my last night experience with my 6-year-old. I'm a football guy. We're watching the Ole Miss game, and he's sitting there asking me all these questions. Daddy, it's just 1st and 10. Why is it 2nd and 6? We went through like good 10 minutes, and I was just telling him an answer to every, and I'm like, this is so much fun. Like, but again, I don't do that enough in my day to day. Like just asking questions, being curious. I think that shows that you care, right, and that you want to educate yourself on whatever it is that's important to the other person. Like all that stuff it's unspoken, but it's massively important into developing any sort of trust and relationship with the other person that you're dealing with.
Yeah, I mean, I've got in one of the podcasts at some point in time, I said, there is no failure, there's only learning, which can be interpreted in so many different ways. But what I keyed in on, I don't even know when, relatively early in life, is that what it gets me super fired up is learning, growth, and development. And there's nothing that I've ever learned where I'm not going through massive pain and suffering and failure. And it's like, but if the goal is to learn, then it's not failure. Like every feedback item that you get is just a learning opportunity. And there is no destination. You're never 100% competent at anything in life. Going back to Steph Curry still doing dribbling and footwork drills every single day. Three-point drills. Like, dude, you're the master of 3 points. Like, what do you mean? It's, well, I wouldn't be if I didn't do this hours every single day. So I think it applies the same in life overall, and it definitely applies in our corporate lives. Is like you can never learn enough. You never learn enough.
Doug, in a crisis situation, the office of the CISO is going to play a role. The executive team, they need unfiltered, trusted information. What do you expect of a CISO in those difficult moments? What do you want them to do? What do you not want them to do? And how much of it is pre-scripted?
Transparency is so important in life, period. And it's certainly important in a crisis situation. And I think one of the other huge benefits of having a CISO at the ELT level is humans don't always operate at their best under stress. And the natural tendency is to get super conservative. And I've never seen that work. Like, you need unfiltered, free flow of information. And running tabletop exercises and being as prepared as you possibly can be is helpful for sure. But like all the known knowns, you've got blockers on. Like, you shouldn't have problems there. There's so much surface area, you don't know where it's coming. You got to be able to diagnose super quickly. And that's most breaches. You're dealing with a bunch of unknown unknowns. And those cases, or maybe unknown knowns, but you've got to surface like the transparency, the coordination, the collaboration across the teams is so critical, and filtering is a significant problem. And that's, I think, a huge advantage for the CISO. And I think they've got to be organized. They've got to be prepared. Right? What is the communication mechanisms? Do we have Slack channels set up? Who's part of the immediate team? But those change so quickly, because as you're discovering and trying to figure out what actually went on and what was truly affected, and who do you have to draw in? You've got to feel safe exposing everything that you know, so that, including bringing in third parties, and so that we can actually get to root cause and be ethical in both our own internal diagnosis and in communicating with external parties.
Do you have thoughts on being careful during that first 24 or 72 hours while you are approaching a disclosure requirement? I've got to tell this client by this amount of time. Do you have some general advice on how to steady the ELT, and maybe how the CISO can contribute to that as you consider responding and doing disclosure?
That's a very, very important point. That transparency I was talking about is with the people that are involved in the incident, up through to the CEO and depending on the severity, up to the board. But it's really important what you communicate when you communicate. Like, you've got to understand what actually happened and what the true impact was. Like, you got to be able to direct both people internally and externally on what they need, what actually occurred, and what is the impact to them, and what do they need to do. So it's not a free for all. Like, I'm not advocating a free for all in any sense. It is a tightly coordinated group of the people that are deeply involved. Within that group, there's got to be no fear of repercussions, no worry about transparency. Like, we're trying to investigate every single avenue. No one's to blame right now. Like, this is not a witch hunt. We're just trying to diagnose what occurred so that we can guide both our internal teams and our customers.
What is the number one measure of success in your mind for bringing the CISO into this type of strategic role with the ELT? Is there a kind of a place that you're shooting for, or a specific thing that you want to achieve with this?
The number one metric I look for is the executive team has got constantly is incorporating risk and opportunity in conversations. And they are proactively drawing the CISO in to these discussions. The tone and tenor should change. That, again, every business decision is a risk. We've got to look at all risks: customer risk, financial risk, cyber risk, physical security risk, at the right altitude and with the right degree of focus. Feel we're seeing within our executive team is much more shared understanding. And again, it helps that we are in the cyber arena, and we've got a bunch of people that have been CISOs or served CISOs for a decent chunk of their tenure. But ultimately, I think that's what we're trying to achieve.
Really enjoyed the conversation today. Thought it was very insightful. I know our community is going to love listening to this. And again, thank you so much for taking some time to talk with us.
Well, thank you for having me on. Thank you for the work that you guys do. Congrats on the new initiative. Very excited for you.
Thank you.
And looking forward to seeing you guys both in person soon. Like we both live in Austin. We are
I know.
all three of us.
Let's figure this out.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Doug. We'll talk soon.
Welcome to the Cybersecurity Council. This council strives to showcase unique cybersecurity leadership stories. Its mission is to demystify and simplify cybersecurity across the entire business landscape. Best practices, lessons learned, operational recommendations, it's all here.